In the spring of 2022, the water in northern Iraq pulled back from the shore of a reservoir, and a city that had been drowned for 3,400 years rose out of the mud. Walls, a palace, towers of fired brick still standing after the river had swallowed them whole. Archaeologists had only a handful of days to photograph it before the water came back and buried it again. This was not a legend. It was not a story carved into a tablet. It happened 3 years ago, and it was filmed, and you can see the photographs for yourself. And here is the part almost no one talks about. A Sumerian clay record, copied and recopied for thousands of years, appears to describe exactly this. Not a flood that covers the cities, the opposite. A time when the great rivers would shrink, when the water that had hidden the old cities would fall away, and the things buried beneath would be seen again, in a fixed order, one after another, the youngest first. And the record names what surfaces last. The Euphrates is drying right now, this year. You can watch it on the satellite images, and if you follow what the falling water is uncovering, and you lay it over what the Sumerians wrote down 5,000 years ago, the overlap is not comfortable. So in the next half hour, I am going to show you the cities, the sequence marks, the exact order it claims they appear in, and the one place it warns should never be uncovered at all. Stay with me, because the last city on that list is the one we may be about to reach. Let me start with what is real, because everything in this video is built on something you can verify, and I will always tell you, out loud, where the documented record ends and where the interpretation begins. That promise is the whole reason this channel exists. The Euphrates is the longest river in Western Asia. It is born from snowmelt in the mountains of eastern Turkey. It runs the length of Syria, and it crosses Iraq before it meets the Tigris and empties, at last, into the Persian Gulf. For at least 6,000 years, this one river fed the first cities our species ever built. Arf, Uruk, Eridu, Sippar, Mari, Nippur, the places where writing was invented, where the wheel first turned, where the first laws were pressed into clay, where a human being for the very first time wrote down their own name. Every one of them grew on the banks of the Euphrates, because in a desert, a river is not a feature of the landscape. The river is the single reason that anyone there is alive at all. But the Euphrates is dying, and this is not speculation, it is measured. Beginning in the 1970s, Turkey launched one of the largest water engineering projects on the planet, a network of more than 20 major dams across the headwaters of the Tigris and the Euphrates. At its heart stands the Ataturk Dam, one of the biggest earth-filled dams in the world, and behind it a reservoir so vast it has its own visible footprint from orbit. Every one of those dams holds back water before it ever reaches Iraq. Add to that 2 decades of relentless drought, rising heat, and collapsing rainfall, and the result is something the Iraqi government has stated openly, on the record, in front of the world. The flow of the Euphrates into Iraq has fallen by more than half within a single human lifetime, and officials have warned, not bloggers, not theorists, government scientists, that if nothing changes, the Tigris and the Euphrates could run effectively dry by the year 2040. A river that has flowed without stopping since before the first pyramid was cut, gone, potentially, within the lifetime of children who are alive today. And as the water falls, the land underneath it is coming back. That drowned city I described at the start of this video is real, and it has a name. The archaeologists call the location Kamuna, and the city itself is believed to be Zakhiku, an important center of the Mitanni kingdom from around 3,400 years ago. For decades it sat beneath the waters of a reservoir on the Tigris, completely submerged, completely forgotten. Then a savage drought dropped the reservoir, and an entire Bronze Age city climbed back into the daylight, a sprawling palace with walls still standing several meters high, a massive multi-story fortification, industrial buildings, storerooms, and, inside, clay tablets that had survived underwater for more than 3,000 years and could still be read. A rescue team worked against the clock to record everything. Then the rains returned, the reservoir rose, and the city went back under. It is down there right now, as you watch this, waiting for the next drought to hand it up again. Now hold that image, because I want you to feel how strange this really is. Before we go a single step further, we are taught that archaeology means digging down, patiently, with brushes and trowels, going deeper into the earth to reach the past. But this is the earth handing the past back up to us. The water lowers, and a civilization simply appears, intact, standing, as if it had been waiting all along for the moment the river would let it be seen. And the Sumerians, the people who lived on this exact land, who watched these exact two rivers rise and fall for thousands of years. The Sumerians wrote about precisely that. They wrote about a day when the waters would be made low, and the buried things would return. This is where the record comes in, and this is where I have to be careful with you, because honesty is the entire point of what we do here. There is no single famous gold-framed artifact sitting in a glass case, labeled the map of the buried cities. That is not what this is. What exists is a cluster of genuine Mesopotamian texts, temple records, the documents scholars call the antediluvian King List, the hymns sung to the old cities, and the geographic tablets that catalogue the settlements strung along the rivers. And woven through all of them is one recurring, haunting idea. The idea is this: the first cities were not destroyed by the Great Flood, they were covered by it, and the Sumerians believed those cities were still down there, beneath the silt and the standing water, in a specific and remembered order, waiting to be uncovered. The clearest version of this survives in the Sumerian King List, a real, translated, museum-held document that exists in more than one copy. It opens with a line that has unsettled scholars for over a century. After kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. Then it names 5 cities that held power before a great flood swept the world: Eridu, Bad Tabira, Larak, Sippar, and Shuruppak. And it states that after the flood swept over, kingship had to descend from heaven a second time and begin all over again, somewhere new. 5 cities, before the water, named deliberately in order. Now here is the interpretation, and I am labeling it as interpretation. Clearly, so there is never any confusion between what was found and what is being claimed. If you take that ordered list of cities from before the flood, and you set it beside the recurring temple promise, that the buried cities would be uncovered when the waters are made low, and you read the two together the way the alternative researchers read them, you get something that stops sounding like history and starts sounding like a prediction, a sequence in reverse. The cities return the way they went under, but backward. The last to be covered is the first to be seen, and the oldest city, the very first, the one the list says kingship descended into at the dawn of the world, is uncovered last of all. That city is Eridu. Remember that name, because everything in this video, every single thread, is being pulled slowly toward it. Let me ground us again in something hard and real before we follow the sequence, because the geography here is not a metaphor, and it is one of the strangest verified facts in all of archaeology. The ancient city of the of the Bible, the great stepped ziggurat you have seen in 100 photographs, was a port, a working harbour. Ships docked there and unloaded cargo from across the Gulf. And today, the ruins of sit in dry, cracked desert, with no river in sight in any direction. The Euphrates moved. Over the long centuries, the river physically wandered across its own floodplain, sometimes shifting its course by many kilometers, abandoning the great cities it had built, and leaving them stranded and dying in the sand. The water gives life, and then, on a clock far longer than any human life, the water simply walks away, and the city dies exactly where it stands. The Sumerians lived through this. They watched it happen across generations. They understood, from direct and bitter experience, that the river covers and uncovers the land on its own slow rhythm. So when they wrote about cities appearing and disappearing with the water, they were not inventing a fantasy out of nothing. They were recording a pattern they had seen with their own eyes and feared. So let us follow the order the texts give us, and let us lay each city, one at a time, over what the falling water is exposing right now, in our own decade. I will take them as the King List takes them, and for each one I will tell you exactly what is documented and exactly what is claimed. Watch how the two keep brushing up against each other. The sequence begins, in this reading, with the cities that went under last, the younger settlements, the ones nearest the surface, the ones the receding water naturally reaches first. And this is precisely what we are seeing today. Across Iraq and Syria, as the reservoirs and the rivers drop, the the tells are emerging from the dust. A tell is an artificial hill, built from one city raised on the ruins of another, layer upon layer, for thousands of years, until the mound itself becomes a small mountain of vanished lives. Iraq is carpeted with them. Most have never once been excavated. And as the water table falls and the reservoirs shrink, satellite surveys, real ones, using declassified Cold War spy photographs laid over modern scans, have begun to reveal an entire lost landscape that no living person has ever walked. Buried canals, drowned field systems, the ghost outlines of settlements no archaeologist has ever set foot in. There are, by serious and sober estimates, many thousands of unexcavated sites in southern Iraq alone. Thousands. We have read perhaps a sliver of them. The overwhelming majority of everything the Sumerians ever wrote down, their letters, their laws, their prophecies, their secrets, is still in the ground, unread, waiting for a hand to lift it out. Sit with that number for one moment, because it changes how you will hear everything that follows. When the texts say the cities will be uncovered, they are not asking you to believe in a miracle. They are describing a process that is, demonstrably, verifiably, already underway. The only real question, the question this entire video circles around, is whether the order in which they come back is random chance, or whether the people who invented writing knew something about the rhythm of these rivers that we, with all our satellites and our falling reservoirs, are only now beginning to catch up to. And if you are still with me this far in, do me one small thing before we go deeper, because it genuinely decides whether stories like this survive. Tap subscribe. This channel takes the oldest writing on Earth seriously enough to check it against real archaeology, and the algorithm only shows that to more people, if you tell it to. One tap, and you go one tablet deeper with me every week. Now, back to the order, because the next city is where it stops feeling like a coincidence. The next city down in the descending order is Shuruppak. And Shuruppak is no minor name. Shuruppak is the city of the flood itself. In the Sumerian and later Babylonian flood accounts, Shuruppak is the home of the one man the gods choose to warn, the figure that later cultures would remember and rename as Noah. It is the last city named before the water comes down, which means in the reverse sequence, it should be among the very first the water gives back. And Shuruppak is real. It is a genuine excavated site, modern Tel Farah in Iraq, and it has produced some of the oldest literary tablets ever recovered anywhere on Earth, including early versions of the very flood story that names it, a city that remembers the water, climbing back out of the water. The symmetry is almost too perfect, and I want you to be suspicious of anything that perfect, because a clean pattern is exactly how a good story slips past your guard. So let me say it plainly. The dating, the flood layer in the soil, the ancient tablets pulled from Shuruppak, all of that is documented and real. The claim that these cities are surfacing in a divinely ordained sequence, in our lifetime, is interpretation. I am asking you to hold both of those in your mind at the same time. That tension, that discomfort, is the honest place to stand, and I am not going to resolve it for you cheaply. Then comes Sippar, the city of the sun god, Shamash, the god who sees everything, because nothing can hide from the light. And Sippar carries one of the most extraordinary stories in the whole of Mesopotamian literature, a story that turns this entire video on its axis. According to a tradition recorded much later by a Babylonian priest named Berossus, in the days before the Great Flood, the gods gave a command: all knowledge, every tablet, every record of the world that existed before, was to be buried for safekeeping in the city of Sippar, the writings of the beginning, sealed in the ground, so that after the water had receded and the survivors crawled back, humanity could dig the records up again and start over without losing everything that had been learned. Sippar, in this tradition, is the library of the drowned world, the hard drive of a lost civilization, buried on purpose, waiting in the dark to be recovered on the day the waters finally fell. And here is what makes the back of your neck go cold. Sippar is real. It was found. It was excavated. And in 1986, archaeologists digging there uncovered a temple library, an actual room, with actual niches cut into the walls, still holding around 800 clay tablets arranged, stored, sealed away, and astonishingly preserved. a buried library in Sippar, exactly where a tradition more than 2,000 years old said the knowledge of the world would be kept. Now I am going to be honest with you about the dating, because this channel does not lie to you to make a chill land harder. Those 800 tablets date to the first millennium, before our era. They are not the records of a world before any flood. That is the documented fact, and I will not stretch it. But the fact remains, sitting there, refusing to go away, the one city named in ancient legend as the secret archive of all human knowledge turned out to actually contain a hidden, sealed archive of clay tablets. The legend pointed at a city and said, "The knowledge is buried here." We dug, and the knowledge was buried there. And it is not only Iraq, and it is not only the rivers. I want you to understand that what is happening here is part of something larger, because the water is giving things back all over the world, all at once, in the same handful of years. In the reservoirs of Spain, a drought pulled the water down and revealed a complete prehistoric stone circle, thousands of years old, that had been drowned beneath a lake for generations. People now call it the Spanish Stonehenge. In other dried reservoirs, sunken villages, lost bridges, and old churches have walked back into the daylight as the levels collapsed. Across the planet, the same decade of heat and drought that is killing the Euphrates is lifting the drowned past back into view, everywhere, simultaneously, and in Iraq specifically, at the Great Mound of Nineveh, when a gate that had been damaged in recent years was being repaired, the work exposed something no one expected. Panels of Assyrian palace carving, reliefs more than 2,500 years old, hidden behind the rubble, showing rows of figures and the gods of an empire that thought it would last forever. The ground keeps opening, the water keeps falling, and the things that were hidden keep coming back, on a schedule we did not set and do not control. Now I need you to really understand who Enki was and what the Abzu was, because without that, the ending of this story will just sound like a scary word. It is much worse than a scary word. To the Sumerians, the world floated on water, not the salt water of the seas. That was a separate, chaotic thing they personified and feared. Beneath the solid ground, beneath the cities and the fields, they believed there was a vast ocean of fresh, sweet water, and they called it the Abzu. It was the source of every spring, every well, every life-giving river that broke the surface. And it was not empty. The Abzu was the home and the domain of Enki, the cleverest of all the gods, the one who shaped human beings out of clay, the one who held the secret knowledge that made civilization possible. The arts, the crafts, the laws, the very design of the world, which the Sumerians called the me. Enki kept the me in the Abzu, beneath Eridu, and in their oldest stories, the boundary between our world and that deep was not sealed forever. It could be opened. It had been opened before. The flood, in their telling, was in part the deep rising up, the waters of the Abzu, and the waters of heaven meeting, and the thin floor of the world giving way. So when I tell you that the first city was built directly over the door to the Abzu, I am not describing a poetic flourish. I am describing what the people who built it believed with total seriousness, that underneath Eridu was the lid on the deep, and that everything humanity was given came up through that opening, and that something could, one day, come back up through it too. Which brings us at last to the city this sequence has been climbing towards since the first minute of this video. The first city, the oldest, the one the King List says kingship descended into at the very beginning of the world, the one that, in the reverse order of uncovering, is revealed last of all, after every other city has already come up into the light. Eridu. Eridu. Eridu is by the reckoning of the Sumerians themselves, the first city. Not one of the first, the place where civilization itself began, and it belonged, above all others, to one god, Enki, lord of the deep waters, keeper of wisdom, master of the underground freshwater ocean, the Sumerians called the Abzu. Enki is the god who, in the flood story, defies the council of the other gods and secretly warns humanity to build the great boat. He is the keeper of forbidden secrets, the one who hands knowledge to mankind against the express will of heaven. And his city, Eridu, was built directly on top of what the Sumerians believed was the entrance to the Abzu itself, the abyss of sweet water beneath the world. Read that again and let it settle. The first city in human history was deliberately founded over what its own builders described as a doorway into the deep. Erdu is a real place. You can put your finger on it on a map. It is called Tel Abu Shahrain in the south of Iraq. It has been excavated, and beneath its ruined ziggurat, the archaeologists found something that genuinely stops the breath. Not one temple, 18 temples, each one built directly on top of the one before it, going down and down and down through the layers of time. The oldest at the very bottom, dating back nearly 7,000 years. 18 sanctuaries, stacked into a single column, every one of them raised on the same sacred spot, every one of them facing the same buried point beneath the earth. Whatever the first human beings believed was down there, they kept rebuilding over it for thousands of years. They never moved. They never abandoned the spot, as if walking away from it was a mistake that no generation could afford to be the one to make. And now the Euphrates is falling. The water that has hidden the deepest layers of southern Iraq for thousands of years is pulling back. The tells are emerging from the dust. The reservoirs that drowned whole Bronze Age cities are dropping and handing them up to the light. The legend said the knowledge was buried in Sippar, and we dug, and we found it. The texts said the cities would return in order, the youngest and the shallowest first, and the sequence, if you follow it honestly all the way down, ends at the oldest city of all, the one built over the door to the deep, the one whose God kept the secret of the flood, the one that the old records seem to circle and to warn about uncovering, the one that comes up last. So here is the question I promised you at the start, and I am going to leave it open, deliberately, because anyone who tells you they know the answer for certain is trying to sell you something. If the Euphrates keeps falling at the rate it is falling right now, and every serious climate projection says that it will, then within a single human generation, the southern floodplain of Iraq, the oldest continuously inhabited landscape on the entire face of the earth, will be drier than it has been in 6,000 years. Thousands of unexcavated cities will come, for the first time within reach, and at the very bottom of the sequence, at the end of the order, after everything else has surfaced, sits Eridu, the first city, the door to the Abzu, the one the oldest texts seem to warn us about. What did the Sumerians believe was underneath it? Why did they raise 18 temples on the same square of ground rather than ever once walk away? And what exactly did they believe the falling water would finally, after 7,000 years, allow to come back out? I have my own reading of it, but I would far rather hear yours before I give you mine. So before I tell you what I think is buried beneath Eridu, tell me down in the comments, do you believe the order of these cities is pure coincidence? Or did the people who invented the written word know something about these rivers that we are only now, with our satellites and our shrinking reservoirs, beginning to confirm with our own eyes? Read that first line of the King List one more time. After kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. They began at the door to the deep, and the water that has kept that door sealed shut for thousands of years is, this very year, going down. If this opens something in you, subscribe and come one tablet deeper with me, because the next part of this story is more dangerous than this one. We are not going to look at where the cities are anymore. We are going to look at when. There is a Sumerian star map, a real one, held in a real museum, that marks not a place, but a date, the year the river runs dry, and what the tablets say is meant to happen on the day that it does. I will be waiting for you there. Keep watching, and keep asking the one question the official histories would so much rather you never thought to ask out loud. What if the people who wrote the first words on Earth were not writing down their past, but writing down a warning meant for us?